Well, hello and welcome to our premiere podcast called Utah Libraries Have You Covered. And we are so excited. I'm Jeri Openshaw, and we have Jason Powers in the control room running the board. So we have Julia Lyon, who's a Utah author, wrote a book called Dinosaur Named Ruth, and we're going to get to that. But first of all, Julia, welcome.
Thank you, Jeri. What a pleasure to be here.
This is so great to have you. Thank you so much. Now, we know Julia because she came in here and recorded her book for the blind and disabled. So we will have that book available online through BARD, and we will also have it available in Braille. We will braille a thermoform, so it will be put on your actual book. And so if you're a parent of a blind child or vice versa, you can read together.
What an honor to hear that my book is going to be in Braille. Thank you for letting me have that opportunity.
Thank you for letting us do this. It's just great. We're so happy to have you. You're an award-winning author, and let's have a little background. Give me where did you come from? What do you have? You know, like you were a newspaper author or newspaper reporter and on and on. So let's hear about you.
You know, I've done a lot of different things, but most of it has centered around writing. Like you said, I am a former newspaper reporter. I worked at a daily newspaper in Bend, Oregon, and then most recently at the Salt Lake Tribune here in Utah. I went to Columbia Journalism School, and I even worked for something called a .com back in the day.
Whoa.
When no one had ever heard of those. And after I had a few kids, I started reading to them and noticed that my oldest loved hearing true stories. And I thought, gosh, what is this children's nonfiction book thing all about? And I started taking classes and learning more, and was lucky enough to stumble on the story of Ruth Mason, a girl who found dinosaur bones in her own backyard.
How did you stumble upon it? That just fascinates me.
So I have a funny story I always tell kids when I visit schools. I knew I wanted to write about a person. I wanted to write someone's story. And I thought I particularly wanted to write about women because there weren't as many books at the time about women, biographies about women. And I was driving by a Sinclair gas station one day. This is a true story about a true story. And I thought, gosh, paleontologists, there must be stories about women who found dinosaur bones. And I literally got on Google and started looking for names.
Thought.
I know. And I found this woman named Ruth Mason. And for about half a second or a few weeks, I thought she was a paleontologist. And it was only later when I realized she was just an ordinary person who found these dinosaur bones that I thought, oh my gosh, this is even a better story.
Well, and started as a child.
That's right.
Yeah. And what was the year
that she found the dinosaur bones?
Started finding the bones.
Well, so she was born in oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the exact date, but she was about 8 years old when she started finding the bones. So the early 20th century. And, you know, we don't have the exact moment when she found those bones, but in interviews and other magazine articles, she talks about just picking up pieces of rubble. And were they rocks? Were they bones? And what it's so fun to talk to kids about is that at the time, a little kid wouldn't know anything.
What an intuitive little person.
That's right. That's
wow.
Right. She was obviously very smart and very curious, but there were no books about dinosaurs for little kids. When she was little, there was no library near her house. There wasn't even a school near her house.
So she lived, where was this? Where did this happen?
It's in Faith, South Dakota, and it would have been about 2.5 days by horse to Pierre.
Oh, wow.
And so when she was very little, she actually had to go into Pierre and stay with family there to even go to school.
Like I said, so intuitive and so curious and finding things. I remember we used to think we could dig to China in our backyard. So I get it.
So it didn't work out.
Oh no, we got dirt under her fingernails. So this started how? I mean, you interviewed kids, is that right?
No, it really began with, I found her name and I had this, inaccurate information from the internet. And I used my journalism skills. I started calling people in South Dakota. And the critical phone call that really convinced me that this was a story is when I connected with the fossil hunter who I talk about in this story.
Right.
Rick Brooks. And I got on the phone with him. My kids were very little. They were in a little daycare and I was on the phone with Rick.
So this guy, you actually talked to him.
Oh, I've met him in person.
How fun.
Yeah, he's still alive and doing well.
He's got to be a little older.
He is, but he was young when he met Ruth. He was probably maybe in his early 20s. And I talked to Rick and he said, what was the most incredible thing for me was seeing how these dinosaur bones changed her life, that it made her dreams come true, that she'd had questions for so many years. And finally she got the answers to those questions.
That's amazing.
It was so cool. I just had that. And I know you're a former journalist. Right. I had that instinctive feeling like this is it.
Big.
Yeah. I was like, this is the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wish I could have met Ruth, but unfortunately she died before I ever started working on this story.
Well, she started thinking about this or finding these when she was very young.
That's right.
How long? What was the transition to? Actually, I mean, she had bones. She had she had some too large that she couldn't dig up.
That's right. That's right. So decades passed. And she created this garden of bones that I talk about in the story. Yeah. And we know that she was writing letters to universities and museums, asking questions. And people, from what I understand, Rick talked to her about this. They were very dismissive of her. And they obviously should not have been.
Right. So this guy, Mr. Brooks, he was the one who finally said, wait a minute, what have you got here?
That's right.
And how did that all happen?
And then he connected her with several gentlemen who started digging up the bones. I mean, what any landowner would tell you in an area, I mean, including in Utah, is if you find dinosaur bones on your land, it's very difficult to get them out. You often need, excavation equipment. Sometimes the areas are so remote, they're bringing in helicopters. And then to get the bones out, the bones have to be protected, sometimes in casts.
Oh, sure.
So, I mean, it's just not something.
They're very fragile.
That's
at that
right.
Point. Yeah.
It's just not something any of us could do on our own. We could not dig them out, you know.
But here's a question. Maybe you don't know the answer. How far did she dig originally? What was she doing to find these original bones?
They were actually on the surface of her land.
Oh.
Yeah, where she lives in the Badlands, there are actual cliffs, and the bones in many cases would be weathered out.
Serious.
Yeah, and then would fall to the ground. And they were also on the riverbank near her house. So she was just picking them up and bringing them home.
This is such a fascinating story and so fun that you were able to undig it. And so what is next? I mean, I love the idea of teaching kids history. I mean, I'm a history buff from way back, and my favorite books are fictional history. I just love. In fact, I just finished one a while ago by Kate Quinn. I just love it. And what's next? I mean, how are you digging more bones up?
I'm digging up more stories.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm working on several things right now. One of them is another, I like to call them strong girl books, books that show people, women from the past who did unexpected things. And there's a term called hidden history, which I think is really exciting. And I think Ruth Mason's story falls into that category, that, maybe these are people that nobody thought were worth writing about before, or maybe just no one knew about them. And I love using my journalism skills to uncover these stories.
So are you finding more young people who are creating history at a young age? Have you found more like Ruth?
There are certainly stories like hers. I've got a story right now that I'm working on that I don't want to talk about too much, but I'm hoping to send it to publishers soon. Yeah, it's about a girl from the 19th century who, let's just say, didn't want to wear the clothes that people expected her to, and came up with her own decisions about how she thought girls and women should be able to dress.
Good for her. So let's go back a little bit. Talk to me. You've traveled.
Yeah.
And reported on kids in poverty. And talk to me a little about your interaction with some of the children you've talked with in your travels.
I think one of the most interesting and amazing opportunities I had as a journalist, I was an international reporting project fellow, and I got to go to both Washington, D.C., where I am from, but also Thailand. And on the border of the country formerly known as Burma, Myanmar, and Thailand, there are refugee camps where probably hundreds of thousands of families live. In many cases, some of those kids may live there their entire lives. And I went there because there had been a tragic death of a young refugee girl in Utah after she moved here from one of these camps.
Oh.
And we went back in time and looked at where her family had lived and what were the circumstances that led them to come here, and perhaps, that might have led to the tragedy that occurred.
It's tough stuff.
It was really tough, but incredibly eye-opening. It's kind of extraordinary to think that right here while we're talking, those camps are in existence and
still today.
Absolutely. And thousands of people live in them and have, limited opportunities, particularly for kids to get an education.
It's so unfortunate.
It's incredibly sad.
Unfortunate. Anything that you could see that would drive people to help out? Is there a way we could help?
I think always connecting with their refugee resettlement groups in every state. So no matter where you live, whether you're in Utah or elsewhere, that is true. There's something called the IRC, the International Refugee
Center, I believe.
Committee. I'm sorry.
Committee. Yeah.
Yep. There's the IRC. And then there's another group in Utah called CCS, which is the Catholic. Oh my gosh, I should have looked
Community
this up. Services.
Uh-huh.
Yep. And both of those do much of the work of helping resettle refugees, and probably in most states. And those are wonderful groups that always need volunteers, that always need donations, that always need people to help, work on English skills. And if you have any time, I would urge people to seek out those groups.
And I'll bet there's some good stories.
And there's probably great stories there too. Yeah.
So let's go back even farther. How did you end up in Utah?
I ended up in Utah because I was lucky enough to get offered a job at the Salt Lake Tribune. I came here in 2006.
From Bend, Oregon?
From Bend, Oregon, as an education reporter. And it was a fantastic opportunity. I covered everything from the breakup of the state's largest school district at the time.
Was that Granite?
It was Jordan.
Okay.
Yep. And I had, again, a very traditional newspaper experience where I was going to all the night meetings and filing things at 10 p.m. And it was a little bit different than the way newspapers are now. We were expected to do many stories every week on deadline. And it was a fantastic opportunity. I also ended up covering a lot of health issues, specifically autism, which there was a lot of growing awareness of at the time. And at the time, Utah, along with probably lots of states, did not always cover autism therapy for children. And I wrote about some of the challenges that caused for families.
That's transitioned.
That has changed.
Well, we'll thank you for that.
Well, it wasn't me, but I wrote about it. But
you were instrumental.
Yep.
Yeah, that's just great. So how long were you at the Tribune?
I was there for a little over 6 years.
Okay.
And then I became a freelance writer. And it was during that same time and I continue to be a freelance writer, that I just started writing books. And it's just a wonderful creative outlet. It's a way to use my journalism skills in different ways. And I not only love writing the books, I love presenting the books to kids. I've had so much fun. I presented at my own elementary school.
I was going to say, you do storytelling.
Yeah.
Well, so if somebody calls you, if they go to your website and we want you to come and talk to us about this book, read this book to us. And
absolutely. I will come read my book. I will come talk about my book. In fact, I'm going to be in the Utah Book Festival this fall. I'll be in Cedar City for what I believe is the first ever, is it the Southern Utah Book Festival? And that's super exciting. And then I'm also going to be in Park City as part of the festival up here.
Oh, great. When is the Park City Festival?
It's all around the same few weeks in October. I think it's mid to late October. Yeah, there's different dates for different events.
You have so many great resources on your website.
Oh, thanks.
You have a media kit. Tell us about that.
Yeah, if anybody wants to contact me and there's all my photo and all the information, I would just love to visit your school. It's so rewarding to connect with kids. One of my big messages with kids is that nonfiction matters, that true stories matter. And I try to talk to teachers and librarians and even parents about that too. In author circles, we say it is a golden age of nonfiction.
Nice.
And that there's just so many wonderful books out there, but I think parents are not always aware of them.
Oh, absolutely. I think that I'm going to give you an assignment to find a young woman who flew.
Oh, there's there's several books on women like that.
Yep, yeah. But maybe we can find one from Utah.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, I'll keep my eyes open for you on any kind of, that may not be the only thing, but tell me about your other books. You've written other books.
Oh, I've written other books. I'm in the middle of a middle grade novel right now. And,
young adult?
No, middle grade, which is the genre between picture books and young adult, which didn't really exist again when I was little.
But that's a great place to be.
That's a great place to be. Yeah. And that, all I'm going to say about that is it's a Utah story. But it's historical fiction, which is a genre I also love. And some of it is inspired by my own family, who was not in Utah, but were German immigrants at the time in the early 20th century, and some of the challenges they faced as the world went to war.
Oh, wow.
And then I wrote an informational fiction book that's also, I've gotten some help from, I'll say, an entomologist at the Natural History Museum of Utah about the decline of a certain insect. So that's fun. And that's informational fiction. Again, another genre which I don't think really existed when we were little. It's, science-based, but it's told through a story, helping kids get engaged with the information through a story, an engaging story.
Yep. What else? What else have you written? What can we look for? If we go to a bookstore, what are we going to find?
The only thing in the bookstore right now is this lovely book, A Dinosaur Named Ruth.
Don't forget this, A Dinosaur Named Ruth.
You should all check it out.
And it is available on your website?
It is. And in Utah, lots and lots of bookstores carry it. It's on Amazon.
It's in Braille here, and it's on audio book here.
That's right. So it's available most anywhere, and it's at tons and tons of libraries across the country, which is just so fun to know. I was in Washington, D.C. About a year ago, actually about to go to the National Book Festival just to attend that year. And we went into a D.C. library, and I said, I wonder if I can go find my book. And
there it was. Okay, I want you to list your awards, or I can do it for you.
Either way.
Like the Texas Topaz Nonfiction Reading List Award.
That's an honor because that's a quick way for librarians and teachers to see books that group recommends, nonfiction books, recommend that schools check out. Yep.
Crazy. Okay, South Dakota Festival of Books. Now, is this because of A Dinosaur Named Ruth?
It is. Yeah. And what happened there is, of course, this book takes place in South Dakota.
Absolutely.
And I was so honored to be invited to represent their state at the National Book Festival a few years ago. How that works, as you know, is that every state chooses a great reads from great places. And I was a South Dakota representative in 2021 and handed out hundreds of bookmarks and coloring sheets and just met people from around the world.
Applause.
Thank you. It was so fun.
And of course, the National Book Festival in Washington, D.C., which we at the State Library here have always attended until COVID hit. And then we kind of put the brakes on. That's a great place. And your book was like was it the Utah book?
No, it was the South Dakota book.
It was the South Dakota book.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then there's a group called A Mighty Girl, which is pretty fun. And they chose me as one of the best books of 2021. And then the Bank Street College of Education, which is another big honor. It chooses the best books of each year. And I was chosen for one of their years as well.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, thank
Very
you.
good. We're so lucky to have you here
Thank you.
recorded this book for us. And so many awards. A mighty girl. I see that here. Reading in the West Award.
Oh, yes. I was long listed for that. Yes. Thank you, booksellers.
Yay. So here's something that my great-great-great-grandfather, George Gideon Snyder, founded Park City.
Oh, wow.
With his wife, Rhoda Snyder.
Okay.
They have stories. Can we talk?
Sure.
Gosh. Their first child, Pearl, died in the winter from influenza, and this is the 1800s.
Okay.
She died of the influenza. It was so snowy and awful there, they couldn't bury her, so they kept her in the barn for 2 weeks.
Oh, my gosh.
I know, right? Finally, they found a place that they could dig, and that became the Park City Cemetery.
Wow.
Yeah, she's there with the rest of them. But here's the funny part. My great aunt, Ruby, his 32nd child, their 32nd child used to babysit me, taught me how to knit. Anyway, a little side story, but I think I might be able to find some young girls for you that
bring it on.
Yeah, because we had it's a mining community, and what they did was fascinating to keep that place going. They fed the miners, on and on. So the women made that happen. And the young girls. So
I love it. I tell kids, I said, kids can do amazing things. Mm-hmm. And if there's one message I want to leave with kids, it's, don't give up. Be like Ruth. Keep asking questions, and you never know what yes, she had to wait a long time to get the answers to her questions.
Yep.
But because she asked them
so many good questions and didn't give up.
Yeah, it's amazing.
For years.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, publishing a book in the children's book world is tough.
Is it?
And so when I think about Ruth, I really try to use her as my inspiration too.
Well, she's in your heart, I'm sure.
She is. I wish I had met her.
Exactly. Would you like to read A Dinosaur Named Ruth?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Because I love this book. I can hardly wait to read it to my grandson.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. He's 3, but he loves dinos.
You know what? I have learned more and more about dinos because of this book, too.
Okay.
A Dinosaur Named Ruth. And I also want to give a shout out to our incredible illustrator.
Oh, I wanted to say that, too, because they are great illustrations.
Her name is Alexandra Bai, and she really brought this story to life.
Great.
Ruth Mason was forever curious about her own backyard. Its secrets, its stories, its quiet clues. She was a girl who kept asking questions and never stopped until she revealed the mystery beneath her busy feet. Millions of years ago, a tropical forest covered this western land near the edge of a great sea. Dinosaurs thundered across the shore. Millions of years later, here was Ruth, climbing trees and riding stick horses into the sunset. It was 1905. The grassy prairie was her playground, spilling out around her family's log cabin in the new state of South Dakota. She didn't know that a very old world lay close enough to touch. She didn't know that dinosaurs once lived in her own backyard. Then one day, when she was 7, Ruth found them. Clues! She picked up these small pieces of the past, cradled them in her hand, and tucked them in her apron pocket. At home, no one could answer her questions. No one thought much of the strange rubble she found on the ground. So the dinosaur experts didn't race toward her family's ranch. The museums didn't come to investigate. But Ruth wondered and wondered about animals, about bones, about anything that might explain this puzzle poking out of the hills of the Badlands. She kept collecting. Soon she had the first seeds for her garden of bones. As Ruth grew up, she never gave up on her backyard mystery. She wrote letters to experts at museums and universities. One after another told Ruth her finds were worthless, not important, nothing special. Ruth didn't believe them. She knew enough about the land to know that what she kept finding wasn't ordinary. It was perhaps even extraordinary. After each new discovery in the hills near her home, Ruth laid her finds out in the summer sun. As the decades passed, her collection grew under her elm trees, a collection of ancient secrets harvested from her land. Some bones were so large, she left them sitting out in the pasture. She kept collecting, and her garden bloomed. Every day, Ruth woke up early to feed the horses, sheep, and cows. She kept licking her envelopes and stamps, putting her faith and questions in the mail. All she needed was one person to drive down the long, dusty road to see her treasures. The answer came back in the mail. Not important, nothing special. Then, finally, when she was about 80 years old, someone knocked on her door. A fossil hunter named Rick Brooks stood on her doorstep. He was looking for remains of sea creatures that once lived in the ancient waters nearby. She didn't have what he was looking for, but Ruth invited him to see her collection in the yard. They stepped outside into Ruth's radiant garden. Bones surrounded every tree, sprinkled among the flowers and neatly trimmed grass, arranged as carefully as an artist's canvas. Ruth's treasures were definitely fossil bones, he told her, millions of years old. He promised to help. Ruth smiled wide. It was 1979. Dinosaur experts arrived at Ruth's ranch. Bones, including pieces of jaws and teeth, jutted out of the steep banks of the Badlands. The experts were astounded. After slowly removing layers of earth, they found thousands of bones, representing at least 99 dinosaurs. Ruth was right. Her finds were important. They were extraordinary indeed. Ruth welcomed back the ancient neighbors she had wondered about for so long. Her quiet ranch transformed. Bone hunters, paleontologists, dinosaur dreamers, and students spent years harvesting the earth. They were the collectors now, revealing thousands of duck-billed dinosaur bones, fragments of Triceratops bones, Tyrannosaurus rex teeth, and the jaws of ancient marsupials whose story could now be told. Ruth soaked up the history of the land even as her time on the ranch was coming to an end. Soon, dinosaur skeletons from the Ruth Mason quarry were displayed in museums in Europe, Japan, and the United States. And Edmontosaurus annectens at a museum in Wales is known simply as Ruth, inspired by the curious girl who discovered a lost world beneath her busy feet. Wind and rain and time could have erased these mighty reminders of the prehistoric world, but here they are, thanks to one very patient girl named Ruth, who pulled the past from her pocket and showed it to the world.
And I might add that Julia has a dinosaur shirt on.
Oh, I have so many dinosaur outfits. This is the one you guys got to see. I think it's really a brontosaurus. But
right.
a good friend from college sent this to me when my book came out, which was super
great.
fun. I have dinosaur skirts. I have a dinosaur dress. I have a dinosaur costume that my kids get really embarrassed when I wear. So I did not wear that today.
Okay. Well, we are so thrilled to have had you today on our podcast. Utah Libraries Have You Covered here at the Utah State Library. Thank you for recording your book and reading it to us now and joining us for this. And if we can put a reservation in for your next book, And then we'd love to have you back.
Oh my gosh, I would be thrilled to do
Love
that.
to have you back. It's just been a sincere pleasure. You can find information about Julia Lyon on your website, which is
JuliaLyon.com, and A Dinosaur Named Ruth, my book, is available everywhere.
and you can find the media kit. If you're a teacher, you can have Julia come and do a storytelling. There are lots and lots of opportunities.
I also have a free teacher's guide on my website, free to download, curriculum aligned. Please, teachers, take advantage of it.
Thank you so much, Julia.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.